January 24th, 2024, 11:47 p.m. Wyoming State Penitentiary shook under the worst blizzard the region had seen in 30 years. Marcus Chen's hands were bleeding from scraping frozen concrete, his prison-issued thermal suit doing nothing against the wind chill of negative 28 degrees. He had 17 minutes before the guards completed their emergency weather rotation. 17 minutes before they discovered the ventilation shaft he'd spent 4 months secretly widening, one spoon scrape at a time. Behind him, the prison walls disappeared into white chaos. Ahead, the BridgerTeton National Forest stretched endlessly dark, 1,000,000 acres of wilderness that would either hide him or kill him. Marcus dropped into waist-deep snow and started running. 300 yards into the tree line, he heard it. Not the prison alarms he'd been expecting. Something else. A sound that made every muscle in his body lock up. A howl, low and ancient, cutting through the storm like a blade through silk. Then another. Then 5 more, surrounding him in the darkness. If stories like this move you, hit subscribe before we continue, and drop a comment telling me what time and city you're watching from. Now, let's see what happened next. Marcus froze, his breath coming in sharp gasps that burned his lungs. The howls stopped. Silence settled, somehow worse than the noise. Then, through the curtain of falling snow, shapes began to materialize. Wolves, 6 of them, moving with the coordinated precision of a military unit. And at the center, stepping forward with the casual authority of something that had never known fear, was the largest wolf Marcus had ever seen. Pure white, nearly invisible against the blizzard except for its eyes. Amber, glowing in Marcus's stolen flashlight beam, intelligent and assessing. The animal stood at least 3 feet at the shoulder, easily 200 pounds of muscle and fur. Around its neck, barely visible, was something that didn't belong. A collar. Not a pet collar. Something technical, with a small blinking red light. A tracking collar. The white alpha tilted its massive head, studying Marcus with an intensity that felt disturbingly human. Then it took a step forward. Marcus's hand moved instinctively to the crude shank he'd fashioned from a spoon handle, hidden in his waistband. Useless against an animal this size, but his fingers closed around it anyway. The wolf stopped. Its ears flicked forward, reading Marcus's body language. For 5 seconds that felt like 5 hours, man and animal stared at each other. Marcus's mind raced through his options. Run? The wolves would catch him in seconds. Fight? He'd lose. Climb a tree? His hands were too numb, and wolves could wait. He was already dead. He'd been dead since the jury foreman stood up 2 years ago and said guilty on all counts. Guilty of embezzling $3 million from BioCure Medical Technologies. Guilty of falsifying research data. Guilty of securities fraud. 25 years in federal prison. Marcus had screamed that he was innocent, that his business partner Derek Walsh had framed him, that the evidence was manufactured. No one believed him. No one except his mother, who died of a stroke 3 months into his sentence, still believing her son was innocent. The white wolf made a sound. Not a growl, but something else, almost conversational. The other 5 wolves shifted, relaxing slightly. The alpha took another step forward, close enough now that Marcus could see the scars crisscrossing its muzzle, old injuries that spoke of a life lived hard. Then the animal did something that made Marcus's rational mind stumble. It sat down. Just sat, like a trained dog, tail curled around its paws, still watching him with those unsettling eyes. The blinking red light on its collar pulsed steadily. Marcus's engineer brain kicked in despite his terror. That collar wasn't just tracking. It was transmitting real-time data, probably GPS coordinates, maybe even biometric information. This wolf was part of a research project, which meant people were monitoring its location, which meant Marcus needed to move, now, before whoever was tracking this animal noticed it had stopped in this exact spot for too long. He started to back away slowly. The white wolf stood immediately, a fluid motion that showcased the raw power in its frame. It made that conversational sound again, louder this time. Two of the other wolves moved to flank Marcus's retreat path. Not aggressive, just blocking. The alpha stepped forward again, and this time Marcus saw it. The limp. Subtle, barely noticeable, but there. The wolf was favoring its left rear leg, and when it shifted its weight, Marcus saw the dark stain in the white fur just above the paw. Blood, frozen into the coat, fresh enough that it hadn't crusted completely. The animal was injured. Marcus stood perfectly still, his breath fogging in the sub-zero air. This wolf, this massive predator that could kill him without effort, was hurt. And it had stopped, sat down, and blocked his escape. Like it was asking for something. That's impossible, Marcus thought. Wolves don't ask humans for help. They avoid humans. They certainly don't approach escaped convicts in the middle of a blizzard and present injured limbs like patients in an examination room. But that's exactly what the white alpha did next. It lay down in the snow, extended its injured leg toward Marcus, and waited. The other 5 wolves watched, still maintaining their loose circle, but their body language had changed. They weren't hunting. They were guarding, protecting their leader while he was vulnerable. Marcus's hands shook, and not from the cold. He'd spent the last 2 years in a cage, surviving by keeping his head down, trusting no one, hardening himself against a world that had destroyed his life. He'd planned this escape for 4 months, every detail mapped out. Steal thermal gear from the laundry, forge tool requisition
forms, weaken the ventilation shaft, wait for a storm severe enough that the guards would be undermanned and distracted, cross the forest to Highway 191, flag down a truck, disappear into Montana, find evidence that Derek had framed him, clear his name. That was the plan. Helping an injured wolf was not the plan. Staying in one location for more than 5 minutes was not the plan. The white alpha made a sound, something between a whine and a grumble, and Marcus realized with a start that the animal was shivering. Not from cold. Wolves didn't shiver from cold, but from pain or shock or both. He should run. He should leave this animal and put as many miles between himself and the prison as possible before dawn. That was the smart choice. The survival choice. Marcus had made nothing but smart choices for 2 years. Smart choices kept you alive in prison. Smart choices meant following rules, avoiding conflict, becoming invisible. Smart choices had gotten him absolutely nowhere. He'd been smart when Derek approached him with the BioCure contract. Smart when he'd followed every regulation, documented every test, maintained every protocol. Smart when he'd trusted his partner to handle the financial reports while Marcus focused on the science. And Derek had used that smartness against him, had forged Marcus's signature on fake documents, created email trails that didn't exist, manufactured evidence so perfect that even Marcus's own lawyer had doubted him. The jury deliberated for 90 minutes. His mother had sat in the courtroom gallery, crying silently as they led him away in handcuffs. 3 months later, she was dead. The last smart choice Marcus had made was deciding to escape. And here, in the middle of a Wyoming blizzard, facing an injured wolf that by all logic should want nothing to do with him, Marcus made his first dumb choice in 2 years. He took off his right glove. The cold hit his exposed hand like an electric shock, -28 degrees turning his fingers red in seconds. He dropped to his knees in the snow, 3 feet from the white alpha, close enough to smell the wild musk of its fur. The wolf didn't move, didn't growl, just watched him with those ancient amber eyes. Marcus extended his hand slowly, palm down, the way he'd seen trainers approach dogs. The alpha sniffed once, nostrils flaring, processing information Marcus couldn't begin to understand. Then it exhaled, a long breath that clouded white in the frozen air, and looked away. In wolf language, looking away meant trust. Marcus reached for the injured leg. His fingers brushed the thick white fur, and the animal tensed, but didn't pull back. Marcus worked quickly, his bare hand already going numb. The wound wasn't deep, more of a laceration than a serious injury, probably from a barbed wire fence or sharp branches. But in this cold, with snow and ice packing into the cut, infection was guaranteed without treatment. He needed something to clean it, something to bind it.
His prison thermal suit had an inner lining, thin insulating fabric. Marcus ripped a strip loose, packed it with clean snow to flush the wound, then wrapped it tight around the wolf's leg. The alpha tolerated this with remarkable patience, only flinching once when Marcus pulled the fabric snug. When Marcus finished, he sat back on his heels, his hand screaming as feeling returned. The white wolf stood, tested the leg, then looked directly at Marcus. For a moment, neither moved. Then the alpha did something that would change everything. It stepped forward, pressed its massive head against Marcus's chest, and held there for 3 seconds. Marcus's rational mind short-circuited. This was not normal wolf behavior. This was not normal anything behavior. When the alpha stepped back, it turned and began walking into the forest. Not running, walking, glancing back every few steps. The other 5 wolves followed. And Marcus, for reasons he couldn't articulate even to himself, stood up and followed them too. The pack moved through the storm with practiced ease, navigating terrain that Marcus could barely see. The white alpha set a pace that Marcus could just maintain, stopping occasionally to let him catch up, waiting with patient tolerance. After 20 minutes, they reached a natural shelter, a limestone overhang that blocked the worst of the wind. The wolves settled into the space, arranging themselves with clear hierarchy. The alpha lay down at the best position, near the back where the rock retained the most heat. The others arranged themselves around him, creating a living windbreak. Marcus collapsed at the entrance, his body shaking uncontrollably now that he'd stopped moving. Hypothermia was setting in. His core temperature had dropped too low. He needed fire, needed shelter, needed to keep moving. But his legs wouldn't respond anymore. His vision swam. This was it. He'd escaped prison only to die in the wilderness 20 miles away. Fitting, in a way. Poetic justice for the man who'd lost everything. He closed his eyes, ready to let the cold take him. Something warm pressed against his left side, then his right side. Marcus's eyes flew open. 2 of the wolves had positioned themselves on either side of him, their body heat radiating through his frozen clothing. The white alpha made that conversational sound again, and the pack rearranged itself. Within minutes, Marcus found himself surrounded by wolves, their combined warmth creating a pocket of survivable temperature. He should be terrified. He should be convinced they were about to eat him. Instead, he felt something he hadn't felt in 2 years. Safe. Marcus's last thought, before exhaustion pulled him under, was that he'd rather die here, with these animals that had shown him more kindness in 1 hour than any human had in 24 months, than spend 1 more day in a cage. Marcus woke to golden sunlight streaming through gaps in the limestone overhang. His first coherent thought was that he was alive. His second was that his entire body hurt. Every muscle screamed in protest as he shifted position. The wolves were gone. Panic flooded through him, sharp and immediate, before rational thought caught up. Of course they were gone. They were wild animals, not his rescue team. He'd been lucky they hadn't killed him in his sleep. Marcus pulled himself upright, his joints creaking like rusted machinery. The storm had passed. Outside the shelter, Wyoming stretched endlessly white under a sky so blue it hurt to look at. The temperature had risen, maybe to -15, almost tropical compared to last night. He needed to move. The prison would have helicopters searching by now, dogs tracking his scent, every law enforcement agency in the state looking for the escaped convict. But when Marcus stepped out of the shelter, his plans evaporated. The blizzard had dumped nearly 4 feet of fresh snow. His footprints from last night were completely erased. The landscape had transformed into an unmarked canvas where nothing existed except white and the dark vertical lines of pine trees. He had no idea which direction he'd come from, no idea where the highway was, no GPS, no map, no compass, just endless wilderness and the slowly dawning realization that he was completely lost.
Marcus turned in a slow circle, searching for any landmark, any indication of direction. The sun was climbing from the east, at least that gave him one reference point. But east of what? He'd been unconscious when the wolves led him here, had no memory of the route. A sound behind him made Marcus spin around. The white alpha stood at the tree line, 15 feet away, watching him with that unnervingly intelligent gaze. In daylight, the animal was even more magnificent than Marcus remembered. Its coat was pristine white, thick winter fur that seemed to absorb light. The makeshift bandage Marcus had applied last night was still in place, dark against the white leg. The wolf made that conversational sound, the one that wasn't quite a bark or a growl. Then it turned and began walking into the forest, looking back once. The same gesture from last night. "Follow me." Marcus hesitated for exactly 3 seconds. Then he followed. What else could he do? The wolf led him through terrain that would have been impassable for a human alone. The alpha seemed to know exactly where the snow was shallowest, where fallen logs provided bridges over hidden streams, where the ice was thick enough to support weight. Marcus struggled to keep up, his prison-issued boots not designed for wilderness travel, his breath coming in ragged gasps at the altitude. After an hour, they reached a clearing where the other 5 wolves waited. They'd killed a deer. A mule deer buck, its throat torn open, steam still rising from the exposed flesh. The pack had already begun feeding, tearing strips of meat with casual efficiency. The white alpha approached the kill, and immediately the other wolves backed away, giving their leader first choice. But the alpha didn't eat. Instead, it tore off a substantial chunk of venison and carried it to where Marcus stood at the clearing's edge. The wolf dropped the meat at Marcus's feet, then backed away and sat down. Marcus stared at the offering, his mind struggling to process what was happening. Wolves didn't share food with humans. Wolves didn't invite humans into their pack structure. Wolves certainly didn't offer fresh kills to escaped convicts who should mean nothing to them. But here was the meat, steaming in the frozen air, and here was his stomach, cramping with hunger. Marcus hadn't eaten in 26 hours. He picked up the venison. It was warm, still fresh, the blood not yet frozen. Every health and safety regulation he'd ever learned screamed at him that this was a terrible idea. Raw meat, potential parasites, risk of disease. But those were concerns for people with options. Marcus had none. He bit into the meat. It was tougher than he expected, gamier, with a taste that was almost sweet. He chewed mechanically, forcing himself to swallow, his body recognizing the protein and fat it desperately needed. The wolves watched him eat with what Marcus could only describe as approval. When he finished, the white alpha stood and returned to the kill, and the rest of the pack resumed feeding. Marcus had just been accepted into the hierarchy. That realization hit him harder than it should have. For 2 years, he'd been alone, completely, devastatingly alone. In prison, you learned quickly that trust was a commodity that got you killed. You kept your head down, your mouth shut, your interactions minimal. Marcus had survived by becoming invisible, by excising any part of himself that might connect to another human being. His cellmate was a meth dealer from Casper, who spoke maybe 10 words a month. The other inmates were violent or crazy or broken. The guards were automatons following procedures. His lawyer stopped returning calls after the conviction. His friends, the ones he'd thought were friends, had all vanished when the scandal broke. Even his mother, the one person who never doubted him, had been taken away. And here were these animals, these predators who by all evolutionary logic should want nothing to do with him, treating him like pack. Marcus sat in the snow and cried for the first time since his mother's funeral. The wolves ignored him, continuing their meal, giving him the dignity of processing his emotions privately. When Marcus finally composed himself, the alpha had finished eating and was watching him again. The wolf's collar caught the sunlight, the red LED still blinking steadily. Marcus studied it more carefully now. The collar was definitely high-tech, probably military-grade construction. There was a small solar panel integrated into the band, keeping the battery charged. LED probably indicated active transmission, which meant someone, somewhere, was monitoring this wolf's location in real time. Marcus's engineer mind started working through the implications. If this was a wildlife research project, they'd have a database tracking the animal's movements, habits, pack interactions. They'd notice if the wolf's GPS coordinates stopped moving for extended periods, or if its movement patterns changed dramatically. Last night, the alpha had stayed at the limestone shelter for hours. That was unusual behavior. Someone would investigate. Marcus needed to understand what he was dealing with. He approached the wolf slowly, hands visible, non-threatening. The alpha watched, but didn't move as Marcus knelt beside it. Up close, the collar's construction was impressive. Waterproof housing, reinforced buckle, a small antenna maybe 3 inches long. There was text stamped into the metal band, tiny letters that Marcus had to squint to read. University of Wyoming, Wolf Reintroduction Project, Alpha M7, Dr. Sarah Chen Research Group. Marcus's heart stopped. Chen. Dr. Sarah Chen. His sister. His older sister, the wildlife biologist who'd cut off contact with him after the conviction. Who'd sent one letter to prison, a single paragraph saying she couldn't be associated with a felon, that it would destroy her career, that she was sorry, but she had to protect herself. Marcus hadn't responded, hadn't blamed her. He'd destroyed his own life. He wasn't going to take her down too. And now, in the middle of the Wyoming wilderness, he was kneeling next to a wolf that his sister was studying. The odds were astronomical. The timing was impossible. Or maybe it wasn't. Marcus had escaped from Wyoming State Penitentiary, which was 60 miles south of the BridgerTeton National Forest. Sarah's research had always focused on Wyoming wolf populations. She'd done her doctorate work here, had published papers about reintroduction success rates. Of course her research subjects would be in this area. Of course he'd run directly into her territory. The white alpha, Alpha M7, tilted its head as Marcus processed this information. The wolf couldn't know that the human kneeling beside it was the brother of the scientist tracking its every movement. Couldn't know that Marcus's sister was probably looking at GPS coordinates right now, wondering why her primary research subject had moved into unusual territory and stopped. But here's what the wolf did know, Marcus realized. It knew humans could help. It knew to approach when injured. It knew to trust, despite every evolutionary instinct saying humans were dangerous. Sarah had done that, had somehow built a relationship with this pack where they accepted human presence, even sought it out. His sister, who'd always been better with animals than people, had created something remarkable here. And Marcus was about to destroy it. Because if Sarah checked those GPS coordinates, if she sent a team to investigate
why Alpha M7 was behaving strangely, they'd find Marcus. They'd report him. He'd be back in prison within hours. Every selfish instinct Marcus possessed screamed at him to remove the collar, disable the GPS, eliminate the tracking. He could do it easily. The buckle wasn't locked, just a heavy-duty clasp that released with pressure. Without the collar, the wolf would disappear from Sarah's database. Marcus could use the GPS unit itself to navigate to the highway, then destroy it. No one would ever know. His hand moved toward the buckle. Alpha M7 growled. Not a warning growl, something deeper, more primal. The wolf's lips pulled back, revealing teeth designed to crush bone. The other 5 pack members, who'd been lounging after their meal, were suddenly on their feet, focused on Marcus. He froze. His fingers were inches from the collar buckle, and the pack was seconds from attacking. The white alpha held his gaze, and Marcus saw something in those amber eyes. Intelligence, yes, but also judgment. The wolf knew. Maybe couldn't articulate the specifics, but knew that Marcus was considering doing something that would harm the pack. Removing the collar would end Sarah's research, would eliminate protections the pack had, whatever governmental permissions and tracking that allowed them to exist without being hunted, would destroy years of his sister's work. Marcus pulled his hand back. The alpha's growl stopped immediately. The pack relaxed, and Marcus made his second dumb decision in 12 hours. He was going to leave the collar alone, going to accept that helping this wolf meant accepting the risk of discovery. Because for 2 years,
he'd made only smart decisions, only survival choices, only moves calculated to keep him alive and isolated and safe. And where had that gotten him? A cage, a dead mother, a destroyed life. These wolves had shown him something he'd forgotten existed. Trust. The kind of trust that risked vulnerability for connection. The kind that said maybe not everything in the world was trying to hurt you. Alpha M7 stood, shook snow from its coat, and began walking. The pack followed. Marcus followed too. They traveled for 3 more hours, moving deeper into the national forest. The wolves set a pace Marcus could barely maintain, but they stopped regularly, letting him catch up, never losing patience with his slower human limitations. Around noon, they reached a valley Marcus recognized from somewhere. Then he remembered one of Sarah's published papers. She documented a pack denning site in a valley that matched this description. Protected on 3 sides by ridges, southern exposure for maximum sunlight, a stream that stayed partially unfrozen even in deep winter. This was their territory, their home ground, and they'd brought him here. The implications made Marcus dizzy. Wolves didn't bring strangers to den sites. That was sacred space, protected fiercely, shown only to pack members. The valley was beautiful in the crystalline, winter light. Snow-covered meadows, dense pine groves, the frozen stream creating natural ice sculptures. And, at the valley's far end, beneath a massive granite overhang, Marcus could see the den entrance. Dark against the snow, large enough for the wolves, sheltered from wind and weather. Alpha M7 led the pack directly to the den. The wolves disappeared inside one by one, until only the alpha remained outside, sitting near the entrance, watching Marcus. The message was clear. Come inside, trust us like we're trusting you. Marcus approached slowly. The den entrance was tight. He had to crouch to fit through, scraping his shoulders against rock. But inside, the space opened into a natural cave, maybe 20 feet deep and 12 feet wide. Generations of wolves had used this place, the floor packed hard from countless paws, the smell of wild fur and earth overwhelming. It was warmer here, sheltered from the wind, the rock walls holding residual heat. The pack had arranged themselves around the space's perimeter. Alpha M7 entered last, moved to the best position at the den's back, and lay down. The other wolves settled around him. And there, in the corner where sunlight streamed through a crack in the rock, was space. Space for Marcus. He sat down in that space, his back against stone that had stood for 10,000 years, surrounded by wolves who'd accepted him for reasons he didn't understand. Outside, somewhere in the world, people were hunting for him. Prison officials, police, maybe even federal marshals by now. Sarah was probably looking at GPS data, wondering about her wolves. Derek Walsh was living free, spending embezzled millions, sleeping peacefully in the life he'd stolen from Marcus. But here, in this moment, Marcus felt something he hadn't felt since before the trial. He felt like he belonged somewhere. One of the smaller wolves, a female with grey markings around her eyes, inched closer to Marcus. She sniffed his hand cautiously, then licked it once before settling down beside him. The gesture was so simple, so uncomplicated by ulterior motives or manipulation, that Marcus had to close his eyes against fresh tears. When he opened them, Alpha M7 was still watching. The wolf's expression, if wolves could have expressions, seemed almost satisfied. Like this was what the Alpha had intended all along. Like Marcus had passed some test he didn't know he was taking. Marcus spent the afternoon in the den, watching the pack's dynamics. There was clear hierarchy, but not through violence. The Alpha led through presence, through small gestures and sounds that the others obeyed instantly. When the Alpha wanted space, the others moved. When the Alpha indicated it was time to rest, everyone settled. When the Alpha stood to drink from the stream, 2 younger wolves immediately followed to guard while he was vulnerable. It was leadership without tyranny, authority built on trust and earned respect. Everything Marcus's father had tried to teach him about management, everything BioCure's leadership books had preached, was here in its purest form. No mission statements or quarterly reviews, just clear communication and mutual protection. Around 3 p.m., the temperature began dropping again. The sunlight through the crack faded from gold, amber, The wolves became restless, standing and stretching, preparing for the evening. Alpha M7 approached Marcus, made that conversational sound, then moved to the den entrance. The pack filed out. Marcus followed. They were going hunting. The wolves moved through the valley with purpose now, not the leisurely exploration of earlier. The Alpha led them to the northern ridge, where the terrain opened into a broader forest with older growth trees. Marcus stayed back, understanding that his presence would spook any prey. But the wolves seemed unconcerned. They were focused on something else. The pack stopped at a small clearing where several trees had been marked with claw gouges, the bark stripped away in long vertical lines. Too high for the wolves to have made. Bear marks. Marcus's blood went cold. Grizzlies should be hibernating in January, but climate change had messed with traditional patterns. An active bear in winter was a desperate bear, a dangerous bear. Alpha M7 approached the marked trees carefully, nose working. The pack spread out, forming a defensive perimeter. They weren't hunting. They were investigating a threat in their territory. The bear attacked without warning. It came from upslope, a massive male grizzly, easily 800 pounds, moving with shocking speed for something so large. The bear was gaunt, ribs visible under its fur, eyes wild with hunger. It had been unable to put on sufficient fat before denning. Now it was awake, starving, and desperate. It charged directly at the youngest wolf, a male barely a year old. Alpha M7 intercepted. The white wolf hit the bear from the side, teeth sinking into the grizzly's shoulder, using his momentum to redirect the charge away from the younger pack member. The bear roared, a sound that shook the trees, and swiped at the alpha with a paw that could decapitate a human. Alpha M7 dodged, but not completely. Claws raked across his flank, tearing through fur and flesh. The wolf yelped, but didn't retreat. The rest of the pack surged forward, attacking from multiple angles, working as a coordinated unit. They darted in, bit, and retreated before the bear could retaliate. The grizzly spun, trying to track threats coming from all sides, bleeding from a dozen wounds but still deadly. This wasn't hunting. This was war. And the wolves were losing. The bear was too big, too armored by fat and muscle. Every wolf hit it landed was superficial. Every swipe the bear landed could be fatal. Marcus watched from the clearing's edge, his entire body vibrating with adrenaline. He should run, should use this distraction to put distance between himself and this situation. But the grey-marked female who'd licked his hand earlier was limping now, her front leg bent at a wrong angle. The yearling male was bleeding heavily from a torn ear, and Alpha M7, the wolf who'd shared food and shelter and acceptance, was facing down 800 pounds of starving predator to protect his pack. Marcus had no weapons, no training in fighting bears, no reason to risk his life for animals he'd known less than 24 hours. He picked up a rock, the biggest one he could lift, maybe 40 pounds of granite, and he charged the bear from behind. The grizzly's attention was focused on Alpha M7, who was making a tactical retreat to draw the bear away from the injured wolves. It never saw Marcus coming. Marcus swung the rock with everything he had, aiming for the base of the bear's skull. He missed. The rock glanced off the bear's shoulder instead, doing no real damage, but the impact spun the grizzly around. Now Marcus had its full attention. The bear reared up on its hind legs, towering 8 feet tall, its roar blasting hot breath that reeked of decay and desperation. Marcus was going to die. He knew it with absolute certainty. But in the 2 seconds before the bear came down, Marcus felt something unexpected. Peace. Because he'd chosen to help, had chosen to fight for something beyond his own survival, had chosen to be part of something instead of isolated from everything. Then, Alpha M7 hit the bear in the throat. The white wolf had circled behind during the bear's distraction, had used the opening Marcus created, and had executed a perfect attack. Teeth sank deep into the grizzly's windpipe, crushing the trachea, cutting off air. The bear tried to shake the wolf off, but Alpha M7 held on with the grip of something that would rather die than let go. The other wolves swarmed, They attacked the bear's legs, its underbelly, any vulnerable point. The grizzly collapsed, thrashing, trying desperately to breathe through its destroyed throat. It took 5 minutes for the bear to die. 5 terrible minutes of choking sounds and weakening struggles. When it finally stopped moving, the pack backed away, bleeding and exhausted. Alpha M7 released his grip, staggered, and collapsed. Marcus dropped to his knees beside the fallen alpha. The wolf's white fur was soaked dark red along its flank, where the bear's claws had torn through. The wound was deep, maybe 4 inches long, bleeding heavily. Alpha M7's breathing was labored, shallow. His amber eyes found Marcus's face, and in them was something that looked disturbingly like resignation. Marcus ripped off his thermal jacket, then tore the inner lining into strips. His hands shook as he packed snow against the wound, trying to slow the bleeding. The cold would help with that at least, would constrict blood vessels. But the gash was too deep, would need stitches, proper medical care, antibiotics, things Marcus couldn't provide in the middle of the wilderness. The other wolves circled around their fallen leader, whining softly. The grey-marked female, despite her own broken leg, limped close and began licking Alpha M7's face, a grooming behavior that spoke of deep pack bonds. The yearling male, blood still dripping from his torn ear, lay down beside the alpha, pressing his body close for warmth. They knew. Animals always knew
when death was approaching. Marcus worked frantically, binding the wound as tight as he dared without restricting breathing. The fabric strips turned crimson immediately, soaking through. He added more layers, applying pressure, talking without realizing he was doing it. "Stay with me. Come on. You don't get to die after showing me what a pack looks like. You don't get to do that." The white wolf's eyes were closing. Marcus grabbed his muzzle gently, forcing eye contact. "Hey! Hey! I didn't give up last night when I should have frozen to death, so you don't get to give up now. That's not how this works." Alpha M7 made a sound, barely audible, that soft conversational tone. But weaker now, fading. Marcus's engineering brain kicked into overdrive despite his panic. What did he know about trauma care? BioCure had required all employees to take wilderness first aid training for field testing. That was 7 years ago, but some information stuck. Stop the bleeding first. Already doing that. Treat for shock. Keep the victim warm. Elevate legs if possible. Maintain airway. Monitor breathing. Marcus looked at the dead bear 15 feet away. Its fur, thick, insulating bear fur. He stood and approached the carcass, pulling out his crude shank. The blade was barely 3 inches long, made from a sharpened spoon handle, but it would have to work. Marcus began cutting. He'd never skinned an animal before, had barely cooked meat before prison. But desperation made him efficient. He focused on the bear's back, where the fur was thickest, cutting away a section maybe 4 feet square. It took 20 minutes. His hands were covered in blood, his makeshift knife bent from the work, but he got a substantial piece of pelt free. He carried it back to Alpha M7 and laid it over the wolf, fur side down, trapping body heat. The other pack members understood immediately. They arranged themselves around their leader, creating a living blanket, with the bear pelt as added insulation. Marcus sat beside the alpha's head, one hand resting on the wolf's neck, feeling the pulse there. Too fast. Thready. Not good. "You're going to be okay," Marcus said, trying to convince himself as much as the wolf. "You're too stubborn to die from a bear attack. I've seen you move. You're basically a furry tank." The sun was setting now, temperature dropping fast. Marcus knew they needed to get back to the den, but moving the injured alpha could make the bleeding worse, could kill him faster. They were stuck here until morning at least. The pack seemed to reach the same conclusion. They settled in for the night, maintaining their protective formation around their leader. Marcus leaned against a tree, exhausted beyond measure. He'd been awake for nearly 40 hours, had escaped prison, crossed miles of wilderness, been accepted by wolves, and fought a grizzly bear. His body was shutting down, but every time he started to drift off, he'd jerk awake, checking that Alpha M7 was still breathing. Around midnight,
The injured wolf's breathing changed, became more labored, with a rattling quality that made Marcus's chest tighten. The alpha was getting worse. Marcus didn't know what to do, didn't have medical supplies, didn't have training for this specific situation. He just had strips of thermal fabric and hope wasn't enough. The wolf's eyes opened, found Marcus in the darkness. Alpha M7 lifted his head slightly, made that conversational sound one more time, then laid his head in Marcus's lap. The gesture was trust. Complete, absolute trust. This predator, this wild animal that could kill him without effort, had chosen to place his life in Marcus's hands. Marcus bent over the wolf, his tears falling onto white fur. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I don't know how to save you. I don't know how to fix this." Alpha M7's tail moved slightly. Once, a small wag. Then the wolf closed his eyes again, and his breathing steadied slightly. He was still alive, still fighting. And if he could fight, Marcus could too. Marcus spent the next 3 hours keeping the alpha warm, monitoring his breathing, changing the bandages when they soaked through. He talked continuously, keeping the wolf engaged, refusing to let him slip away. He talked about everything, about BioCure and the research he'd been doing on gene therapy treatments, about his mother, who'd believed in him until her last breath, about Sarah, the sister who'd abandoned him, but who'd created something beautiful with these wolves, about Derek Walsh, the partner who'd destroyed his life, about the escape, the fear, the desperate hope that he could somehow prove his innocence. The wolves listened, or at least they seemed to, their ears flicking toward him when he spoke. The grey-marked female inched closer, her broken leg awkward, and rested her head on Marcus's knee. The yearling male draped himself across Marcus's feet, keeping them warm. The pack had fully accepted him now. In their moment of greatest vulnerability, when their leader was injured and they should trust no one, they'd chosen to trust Marcus completely. Dawn came slowly, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Alpha M7 was still alive. His breathing was stronger, the bleeding had stopped, his eyes were more alert. He was going to survive. The relief that flooded through Marcus was so intense, he almost passed out. The wolf tried to stand, but Marcus put a hand on his shoulder. "Not yet. You need to rest. We'll get you back to the den slowly." But Alpha M7 growled softly, insistent. The pack leader stood on shaky legs, swayed once, then steadied. He took a tentative step, then another. The other wolves immediately moved to support him, flanking him on both sides, slowing their pace to match his. They began the journey back to the den. It took 2 hours to cover the distance that had taken 30 minutes yesterday. They stopped frequently, letting Alpha M7 rest. Marcus stayed close, ready to catch the wolf if he collapsed. But the alpha's strength was returning. By the time they reached the valley, he was walking almost normally, though Marcus could see the pain in every movement. They made it to the den just as the sun reached its zenith. Alpha M7 collapsed immediately inside, breathing hard. The pack arranged themselves around him, licking his wounds, providing comfort. Marcus slumped against the den wall, his body finally giving out. He fell asleep within seconds. He dreamed of his mother. She was in their old kitchen in Laramie, making dumplings the way her mother had taught her. Sarah was there too, younger, maybe 12 years old, chattering excitedly about a wolf documentary she'd watched. Marcus was 16 in this dream, helping his mother fold dumpling wrappers, listening to his sister's enthusiasm. "They're so intelligent," Dream Sarah said. "They have complex social structures. They communicate with body language and vocalizations. They're like us, Marcus. They understand family." Dream Marcus's mother smiled. "Maybe someday you'll work together. Marcus with his science, Sarah with her animals. You could do something important." The dream shifted. Now Marcus was in the courtroom, watching the jury foreman stand. But instead of saying guilty, the man said, "The wolves are coming." Marcus looked around. The courtroom was empty except for Alpha M7, sitting in the judge's chair, wearing the collar with its blinking red light. The wolf spoke with his mother's voice. "Wake up, Marcus. Someone's coming." Marcus jolted awake. It wasn't a dream. There were voices outside the den, human voices. He scrambled to his feet, heart hammering. The wolves were alert, ears forward, focused on the den entrance. Alpha M7 raised his head, listening. The voices were getting closer. 2 people, maybe 3. Then a woman's voice, clear and commanding. The GPS shows Alpha M7 stationary at the den site for over 18 hours. That's extremely unusual behavior. He should be ranging at this time of day. Another voice, male, younger. Could be injured. There were reports of a grizzly in this sector. Then we need to check on him. The whole pack's GPS signatures are clustered at the den. Something's wrong. Sarah. It was Sarah's voice. Marcus's sister was outside the den right now, 30 feet away,
about to discover her research subject being protected by her escaped convict brother. Marcus looked at Alpha M7. The wolf looked back. In that exchange, a decision was made. Marcus stood and walked to the den entrance. He squeezed through the opening, emerging into bright sunlight, his hands raised, visible, non-threatening. 3 people stood in the clearing. Sarah Chen was in the center, 38 years old, her black hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, wearing heavy winter field gear. She held a tablet displaying GPS tracking data. To her left was a young man Marcus didn't recognize, probably a graduate student, holding a tranquilizer rifle. To her right was an older man with a camera, documenting the research trip. All 3 froze when Marcus appeared. Sarah's face went through several expressions in rapid succession: confusion, recognition, shock, disbelief, and finally, something that might have been anger or fear, or both. Marcus? Her voice was barely a whisper. "Hi, Sarah." Marcus kept his hands raised. "Before you call the authorities, I need to tell you something. Your Alpha is injured. Bear attack yesterday evening. Deep lacerations on his left flank. I've done what I can, but he needs proper medical attention." Sarah stared at him like he was a ghost. You escaped from prison. 48 hours ago, I ran into the National Forest during the blizzard." He nodded toward the den. "Your wolves found me. Alpha M7 was injured. I helped him. Then we were attacked by a grizzly. The pack killed it, but your Alpha took serious wounds protecting the younger members." The graduate student raised his tranquilizer rifle slightly. "Dr. Chen, should I call this in?" Sarah held up a hand, stopping him. Her eyes never left Marcus's face. "You're telling me you've been with my research pack for 2 days. They saved my life. I'm trying to return the favor." Marcus slowly lowered his hands. "I know you have to report me. I know you have to call the police. But please, check on your wolves first. Make sure Alpha M7 gets treatment. Then you can do whatever you need to do." Sarah's jaw tightened. "The pack is allowing you near the den?" "The pack is inside the den, with me, right now." That clearly shocked her more than anything else. Sarah had spent 5 years building trust with this wolf pack, approaching slowly, earning their acceptance through patient observation. And her criminal brother had apparently achieved full pack integration in 48 hours. She made a decision. "Show me." Marcus turned and crawled back into the den. Behind him, he heard Sarah giving instructions to her colleagues. "Stay here. Don't approach unless I signal. If I'm not out in 10 minutes, call for backup." The graduate student protested. "Dr. Chen, he's a convicted felon. This isn't safe." "That convicted felon is also my brother. And if he says my wolves need help, I'm going to help them." Sarah followed Marcus into the den. The space that had felt Comfortably spacious for Marcus alone suddenly felt cramped with 2 people. Sarah had to crouch, adjusting to the low ceiling. Then she saw the pack. 7 wolves arranged protectively around their Alpha. Alpha M7 lay at the den's back, the bear pelt still covering him, the bandages Marcus had fashioned visible around his flank. The other wolves watched Sarah with cautious acceptance. They knew her scent had been conditioned to her presence over years, but they'd never let her this close to their den,
this close to their injured leader. Sarah's professional composure cracked slightly. Oh my God. She moved slowly toward Alpha M7, her body language submissive, non-threatening. The pack allowed it. She knelt beside the injured wolf, gently lifting the bear pelt to examine the wounds. Her hands moved with practiced expertise, checking the bandages, the wound edges, the wolf's temperature. "You cleaned this?" "Best I could. Used snow to flush it. Packed it with strips from my thermal gear." "You probably saved his life. This could have bled out." Sarah pulled a first aid kit from her pack and began working. She had proper gauze, antibiotic ointment, even a syringe of broad-spectrum antibiotics. Alpha M7 tolerated her ministrations with the same patience he'd shown Marcus, only flinching when she administered the injection. Marcus watched his sister work, seeing the deep care she had for these animals. This was Sarah's passion, her life's work, and he'd stumbled into it by accident, or fate, or whatever force had led him into this valley. When Sarah finished treating Alpha M7, she sat back on her heels and finally looked at Marcus directly. "You're not supposed to be here." "I know. You escaped from prison. Do you understand what that means? How much trouble you're in?" "I've been in trouble for 2 years, Sarah. This is just a different kind." Her expression hardened. "You were convicted by a jury. The evidence was overwhelming." "The evidence was fabricated. Derek framed me." Marcus kept his voice level, refusing to rise to the bait. "I've been saying that since the beginning. No one believed me." "Because it wasn't believable, Marcus. You had access, opportunity, motive." "I had none of those things. Derek had all of them." Marcus met her eyes. "But I didn't call you here to argue about my innocence. I called you here because your wolf needed help. Now he's treated. You can call the authorities. I won't run." Sarah studied him for a long moment. The grey-marked female, apparently sensing the tension, limped over and pushed her head against Marcus's leg. Sarah's eyes widened. "She's bonded to you." "They accepted me into the pack. All of them." Marcus gestured around the den. "Alpha M7 shared food with me. They let me sleep in the den. When the bear attacked, they fought to protect me." Sarah looked between Marcus and the wolves, her scientific mind clearly struggling with what she was witnessing. "That's not normal behavior. Wolves don't integrate humans into pack structure. Not like this. Not in 2 days." "I know it doesn't make sense, but it happened." Marcus paused. "Maybe it's because I helped Alpha M7 when he was injured. Maybe it's because I didn't try to dominate or control. I just existed with them, accepted what they offered, tried to be worthy of their trust." Sarah's expression softened slightly. "That sounds like something Mom would have said." The mention of their mother hung in the air between them. Marcus felt the old grief rising, but pushed it down. "She believed in me, Sarah, until the end. She died believing I was innocent." "I know." Sarah's voice cracked slightly. "I know she did. And I couldn't. I had my career, my research, my reputation. I couldn't be associated with a convicted felon. I never blamed you for that." "You should have." Sarah wiped her eyes angrily. "You were my little brother. I should have stood by you. Instead, I cut you off to protect myself." Marcus wanted to say it was okay, wanted to absolve her. But it wasn't okay. Her abandonment had hurt worse than the conviction, worse than the cage, worse than everything except losing their mother. "You made your choice. I understood it, even if I didn't like it." Sarah looked at Alpha M7, who was watching their exchange with interest. "This wolf, he's the dominant male of the most successful reintroduced pack in Wyoming. I've studied him for 4 years. He's incredibly intelligent, cautious, protective of his pack. He's never shown aggression toward humans, but he's never sought out human contact either. Until you." She turned back to Marcus. "What did you do? How did you earn his trust?" "I treated his injury. Then I followed him. Then I fought beside him. Marcus shrugged. I didn't try to earn anything. I just responded to what was happening. He needed help. I helped. He offered shelter. I accepted. He was attacked. I fought. There wasn't strategy, Sarah. There was just reaction, instinct. Instinct, Sarah repeated, like pack behavior. Maybe, I don't know. Marcus looked at his hands, still stained with bear blood and wolf blood and his own blood from various cuts. I spent 2 years in a cage, isolated from everything. These wolves showed me what connection looks like, what trust looks like, what family looks like. They reminded me of things I'd forgotten. Sarah was quiet for a long time. Outside, Marcus could hear the graduate student calling in, asking if Dr. Chen needed assistance. She ignored him. Finally, she spoke. I have to report you. I know. You're an escaped convict. I'm an officer of the court as a witness to your original trial. I don't have a choice. I know that too. Marcus met her eyes. But can I ask one thing? Can I stay until Alpha M7 is stable? Just a few more hours. Make sure he's going to recover. Then I'll surrender. I won't fight. I won't run. I'll go peacefully. Sarah studied him, conflict clear on her face. Professional obligation versus familial bond. Legal requirement versus moral uncertainty. If I let you stay, if I wait to report you, I could lose my research permits, could lose my position at the university, could face charges for aiding an escapee. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important. But Sarah, these wolves risked their lives for me. I owe them. Sarah closed her eyes, and Marcus saw her make the decision. When she opened them, there was resignation there. 4 hours. I'll tell my team that the pack is agitated, and we need to wait before approaching further. That's plausible given the bear attack. 4 hours for Alpha M7 to stabilize. Then, I call the authorities. Relief flooded through Marcus. Thank you. Don't thank me. Sarah's voice was bitter. I'm still sending you back to prison. I'm just delaying it slightly. She moved toward the den entrance, then paused. For what it's worth, Marcus, I never stopped loving you, even when I cut contact, even when I convinced myself you were guilty. I never stopped being your sister. Marcus's throat tightened. I never stopped being your brother either. Sarah crawled out of the den. Marcus heard her talking to her colleagues, explaining the situation, sending them back to their base camp to retrieve additional medical supplies. Buying time. He looked at Alpha M7. The wolf was watching him, with those knowing amber eyes, the eyes that saw too much and understood more than any animal should. She's going to turn me in, Marcus said softly. In 4 hours, I'll be back in a cage. But at least you'll be okay. At least the pack will be protected. The white wolf made that conversational sound, softer now, almost questioning. Marcus smiled, despite everything. Yeah, I'm scared. Terrified, actually. But it was worth it. Meeting you, being part of the pack, even for 2 days, that was worth everything that happens next. The grey-marked female pressed closer, as if offering comfort. The yearling male moved to Marcus's other side. The rest of the pack arranged themselves around him, creating a protective circle. They knew, somehow, they knew he was leaving soon, and they were saying goodbye the only way they could. Marcus spent the next 3 hours with the pack, memorizing every detail. The way Alpha M7's breathing had steadied, growing stronger with each hour. The way the grey-marked female kept her broken leg elevated, following Marcus's earlier instruction. The way the yearling male's torn ear had already started healing, the bleeding stopped. The way the entire pack moved as one organism, each member attuned to the others, communicating through glances and small sounds and body language too subtle for humans to fully decode. This was family. Real family. Not bound by genetics or obligation, but by choice and trust and shared survival. Around 3 p.m., Sarah returned. Her expression was troubled, conflicted. She crawled into the den and sat beside Marcus. For a moment, Neither spoke. Then Sarah said, "I made some calls." "To the police?" "To Derek Walsh." Marcus's head whipped around so fast his neck cracked. "You what?" "I called Derek, told him I'd been reviewing your case files, that I had questions about the evidence, asked if he'd meet with me." Sarah pulled out her phone, showing Marcus the screen. He agreed. Tomorrow, his office in Denver. "He thinks I want to discuss a research partnership, some biotech application of wolf behavior studies." Marcus's heart was pounding. "Why would you do that?" "Because you've been saying he framed you for 2 years. Because Mom died believing you were innocent. Because my little brother just spent 48 hours surviving in the wilderness and was accepted by a wolf pack that doesn't accept anyone." Sarah's voice was shaking. "Because maybe I was wrong. Maybe I chose my career over family when I should have chosen family. Maybe it's not too late to fix that." Marcus couldn't breathe. "Sarah, I'm not saying I believe you're innocent. Not yet. But I'm saying I'm willing to investigate, willing to question, willing to actually look at the evidence instead of just accepting the verdict." She met his eyes. "That's more than I did 2 years ago. It's the least I owe you. You're risking everything. You risked everything escaping from prison. You risked everything helping these wolves. Maybe
It's time I took a risk too." Sarah stood. "I'm not reporting you. Not yet. I'm telling the authorities that I found evidence of a bear attack, that the pack is safe, that we're monitoring Alpha M7's recovery. I'm buying time." "How much time?" "I don't know. A week, maybe 2 before someone questions why I'm spending so much time at this particular den site. But it's something. It's a chance." Marcus stood too, his legs shaky. "If you do this, if you help me, you could lose everything. Your position, your research, your reputation." "I already lost my brother once. I'm not losing him again without a fight." Sarah's expression was fierce. "But Marcus, you have to stay here. In this valley. If anyone sees you, if you're spotted anywhere near civilization, it's over. Can you do that? Can you survive here?"
Marcus looked at Alpha M7, who'd raised his head to watch the conversation. The wolf's tail moved once, a small wag. "I think I can manage." Sarah smiled slightly, the first real smile Marcus had seen from her in 2 years. "The pack will help you. They've already accepted you. That's extraordinary. That's unprecedented." She pulled supplies from her pack. Food, a better first aid kit, water purification tablets, a weather radio. "I'll bring more tomorrow. Set up a supply cache near the valley entrance where the pack won't bother it. You'll need to stay mobile, stay invisible. Can you do that?" "Yes." Sarah hesitated, then pulled Marcus into a hug. It was awkward, stiff from 2 years of estrangement, but it was real. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm sorry I didn't believe you. I'm sorry I abandoned you. I'm sorry for everything." Marcus hugged her back, 2 years of isolation cracking open. "I'm sorry too, for all of it." When they separated, both were crying. Sarah wiped her eyes professionally, composing herself. "I need to go before my team gets suspicious. But Marcus, promise me something. Promise me you'll stay safe. Don't take unnecessary risks. Don't do anything stupid." "I promise." She crawled toward the den entrance, then looked back one more time. "Mom would be proud of you. What you did, helping these wolves, standing up for the pack. She'd be proud." Then she was gone. Marcus spent the next 6 days learning to live wild. The pack taught him without words. Where to find water under ice, which plants were safe to chew for nutrients, how to read weather patterns in cloud formations, how to move silently through snow without leaving obvious tracks. Alpha M7 recovered with remarkable speed. By day 3, he was walking without limping. By day 5, he was running with the pack again, leading hunts with the same commanding presence as before. The bear wound was healing clean, Sarah's antibiotics and Marcus's field treatment combining to prevent infection. The grey-marked female, who Marcus had started calling Silver because of her distinctive markings, had become his constant companion. Her broken leg was healing slowly, and she couldn't keep up with the pack during hunts, so she stayed with Marcus, sharing his watches, sleeping pressed against him at night. The yearling male, a wolf Marcus called Scout for his curious nature, appointed himself as Marcus's personal guardian. Scout would range ahead during Marcus's movements through the valley, checking for threats, alerting if anything unusual approached. Marcus had become part of the pack's daily rhythm. He wasn't a wolf, could never be a wolf, but he'd found his place in their hierarchy, something between protected member and honorary wolf, accepted fully but not expected to perform beyond his human limitations. Sarah came every day at dawn, leaving supplies at the cash point near the valley entrance. She never entered the den again, maintaining professional distance in case her activities were being monitored. But she left notes, updates written in their childhood code, a simple substitution cipher they'd invented when Marcus was 10 and Sarah was 14. Day 2 note. Meeting with D postponed. He's suspicious. Working on alternative approach. Stay hidden. Love, S. Day 3. Hired private investigator, former FBI, mom's life insurance money. He's reviewing case files. Found irregularities. Don't lose hope. Day 4. PI discovered D's financials don't match. Offshore accounts in Cayman Islands. Following money trail. Getting close. Day 5. Meeting scheduled. Tomorrow. Denver, his office. Wearing wire. FBI involved now. They're interested. Day 6. It's happening today. If you don't hear from me by nightfall, take the emergency sat phone in the cache. Call number programmed in. They'll extract you. Marcus read that last note 3 times, his heart hammering. Today. Everything would be decided today. He spent the morning pacing the valley, unable to settle. The pack sensed his agitation. Alpha M7 approached around noon, made his conversational sound, then sat beside Marcus with patient solidarity. She's trying to prove I'm innocent, Marcus told the wolf. Meeting with the man who destroyed my life. If it goes wrong, if Derek realizes what she's doing, he could hurt her, could kill her. Alpha M7's amber eyes held steady, and Marcus remembered. This wolf had fought a grizzly bear to protect his pack, had taken wounds that could have killed him, had risked everything for family. Sarah was doing the same thing. Marcus sat beside the alpha, drew strength from the animal's calm presence, and waited. The afternoon crawled by with agonizing slowness. Marcus checked the sun's position obsessively. 3 p.m., 4 p.m., 5 p.m. Sunset was at 6:30. If Sarah didn't leave word by nightfall, he was supposed to assume the worst. At 6:15 p.m., as golden light painted the valley in amber and shadow, Marcus heard it. A helicopter. His first instinct was to hide, to run deeper into the forest, to avoid detection. But something made him pause. The helicopter was flying a search pattern, but not a prison search pattern. This was slower, more methodical. Looking for something specific, looking for someone who wanted to be found. Marcus stepped into the open meadow, raised his arms and waved. The helicopter banked toward him, descended, and landed 100 yards away in a flat section of the valley. The pack scattered at the noise, disappearing into the trees. All except Alpha M7, who stood beside Marcus, hackles raised but not fleeing. The helicopter's door opened. Sarah emerged, followed by 2 men in FBI windbreakers. Marcus's stomach dropped. This was it. She'd failed, and now they were here to arrest him, to take him back to prison, to bury him forever. But Sarah was smiling, crying and smiling at the same time. She ran across the snow toward Marcus, and when she reached him, she grabbed his shoulders hard.
Enough to hurt. You're innocent. We proved it. Derek confessed to everything. Marcus couldn't process the words. They didn't make sense. Sarah was still talking, words tumbling out in a rush. The private investigator found the offshore accounts. $3 million, exactly the amount you were accused of embezzling.
But the accounts weren't opened by you. They were opened by Derek using forged documents. Then the investigator found the real books, the actual financial records Derek kept hidden. He'd been embezzling from BioCure for 5 years, not just the one transaction you were convicted for, over $15 million total. One of the FBI agents approached, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes. "Mr. Chen, I'm Special Agent Rebecca Torres. We've been investigating Derek Walsh for securities fraud related to multiple biotech companies. Your case was one of several we were reviewing. Your sister's information broke the case open." "I don't understand," Marcus managed. "Derek confessed?" "Once we showed him the evidence, he tried to run," Sarah said. "Made it to the airport. FBI arrested him at the gate. Then he confessed to everything. The embezzlement, the falsified documents, the frame job, all of it. Marcus, you were right. About everything." Marcus's knees gave out. He sat down hard in the snow, his visions swimming. 2 years. 2 years of his life in a cage. His mother dying while still believing he was a criminal. His career destroyed. His reputation shattered. All because Derek Walsh needed a scapegoat. "Why?" His voice came out broken. "Why me? We were partners. I trusted him." Agent Torres crouched beside him. "According to Walsh's confession, you were getting too close to discovering the embezzlement. You'd noticed discrepancies in the quarterly reports, asked questions about funding allocations. He needed to eliminate you before you figured out what he was doing. Framing you accomplished 2 goals. Got rid of the threat and provided a patsy for his crimes." Sarah sat in the snow beside Marcus, took his hand. "There's more. Derek wasn't just embezzling. He was selling BioCure's proprietary research to foreign competitors. The gene therapy protocols you developed, the ones that were supposed to treat genetic disorders, he sold them to pharmaceutical companies in China and Russia for millions. Your work, Marcus, your research. He stole it and profited while you sat in prison." The rage that filled Marcus was so intense it felt physical, like fire in his veins. Everything. Derek had taken everything. Where is he now? Federal custody. He's facing charges in 3 states, plus federal charges for wire fraud, securities fraud, theft of trade secrets, and perjury. Agent Torres stood. "Mr. Chen, I have good news. The U.S. Attorney has agreed to file an emergency motion to vacate your conviction. With Walsh's confession and the evidence we've gathered, you'll be fully exonerated within 48 hours. You're a free man." Free. The word didn't compute. Marcus looked at Sarah. "Mom, does she—" "She died believing you were innocent," Sarah said softly. "She never doubted you for a second. And Marcus, I'm so sorry. I should have believed you too. I should have fought for you. I should have been the sister you deserved." Marcus pulled Sarah into a hug, both of them crying now, 2 years of pain and betrayal and loss pouring out. When they finally separated, Agent Torres was speaking into her radio, coordinating something. She turned to Marcus. "We need to get you out of this valley, transport you to Denver for processing, get you officially released from custody, handle the legal paperwork. It'll take a few days, but then you'll be completely free." Marcus looked around the valley, at the forest that had sheltered him, at the den that had protected him, at Alpha M7, who stood 20 feet away, watching with those knowing amber eyes. "Can I have a few minutes? To say goodbye?" Agent Torres nodded. 5 minutes, then we need to leave before weather closes in." Marcus walked to where the white Alpha waited. Sarah started to follow, but Agent Torres stopped her. "Let him go alone. This is his moment." Marcus knelt in the snow in front of Alpha M7. The wolf tilted his head, that familiar questioning gesture. "I have to go," Marcus said. "Back to the human world. Back to the life I had before all this. But I need you to know something. You saved me. Not just my life, but everything that makes life worth living. You reminded me what trust looks like, what family looks like, what it means to fight for something beyond yourself." The white Alpha made his conversational sound, softer now. Marcus reached out slowly, and the wolf allowed it, let Marcus rest his hand on the scarred muzzle. "Thank you. For everything. For accepting me when I had nothing. For fighting beside me. For showing me what an alpha really is." Silver emerged from the tree line, limping but healing. Scout followed, along with the rest of the pack. They arranged themselves around Marcus and their alpha, one last time, forming that protective circle. Marcus stood, looked at each wolf individually, committing them to memory. These animals who'd given him back his humanity when he'd lost all hope of ever finding it again. He turned and walked back to Sarah and the FBI agents. Didn't look back. If he looked back, he might not be able to leave. The helicopter ride to Denver was surreal. Marcus stared out the window as the National Forest fell away, replaced by highways and buildings and civilization. It felt foreign now, after a week in the wilderness, loud and chaotic and overwhelming. The processing took 3 days. Paperwork, interviews, depositions, meetings with lawyers and prosecutors. Marcus told his story over and over, each repetition feeling less real. The media picked up the story immediately. "Wrongly convicted man survives week in wilderness while sister proves his innocence," was the headline that went viral. News vans camped outside the FBI building. Reporters shouted questions Marcus couldn't answer. On the 3rd day, Marcus stood in front of a federal judge. The courtroom was packed with journalists and curious observers. Derek Walsh sat at the defense table, looking smaller than Marcus.
Remembered. Defeated. The judge read the motion to vacate Marcus's conviction, listed the evidence of fraud and perjury, cited Derek's confession. Then the judge looked directly at Marcus. "Mr. Chen, on behalf of the justice system that failed you, I apologize. Your conviction is hereby vacated, all charges dismissed. You are free to go." Free. Marcus walked out of the courthouse a free man for the first time in 2 years. Sarah waited on the steps, along with a crowd of reporters and cameras. "Marcus, how does it feel to be free? What are you going to do now? Will you sue Derek Walsh? Is it true you survived by befriending wild wolves?" Marcus ignored them all. He walked to Sarah, pulled her into another hug. "Thank you. For believing me. For fighting for me. For not giving up. I should have done it 2 years ago. I'll spend the rest of my life making that up to you." They pushed through the media crowd to Sarah's truck. Marcus climbed in, and Sarah drove them away from Denver, away from the courthouse, away from civilization. "Where are we going?" Marcus asked. Sarah smiled. "You didn't think you'd have to say goodbye permanently, did you?" An hour later, they were back at the National Forest. Sarah parked at a trailhead Marcus didn't recognize, grabbed 2 backpacks from the truck bed. "Come on, I want to show you something." They hiked for 30 minutes, following a trail that seemed invisible to Marcus, but that Sarah navigated easily. Then they emerged into a clearing Marcus knew. The valley. His valley. The pack's valley. Alpha M7 was there, standing on a ridge overlooking the meadow. When he saw Marcus, the white wolf's tail began to wag. The entire pack emerged from the forest. Silver, Scout, and the others. They approached cautiously at first, then with growing recognition. Scout reached Marcus first, pressing his head against Marcus's legs. Silver followed, making sounds of pleasure. Alpha M7 descended from the ridge with deliberate dignity. He walked to Marcus, made that conversational sound, and sat down. The same gesture from their first meeting. Trust, acceptance, pack. Marcus knelt in the snow, ran his hands through the white wolf's thick fur, and felt something inside himself finally settle. This was real. This family was real. Sarah watched with tears in her eyes. "I thought you might want to visit. I've arranged it with the Park Service. You can come here anytime, help with my research. The pack knows you. They'll accept your presence." "How often can I come?" "As often as you want. Daily, if you're willing to hike. I could use an assistant, someone who understands pack dynamics from first-hand experience." Sarah grinned. "Plus,
You're the only person besides me that Alpha M7 tolerates for extended periods. That's scientifically valuable data." Marcus laughed, the sound feeling strange and wonderful after so long. "When do I start?" "Tomorrow, if you want. There's a cabin near the research station. It's small, but it's warm and has running water. You can stay there while you figure out your next steps." "My next steps," Marcus repeated. For 2 years, his only goal had been survival. Now he had options again, possibilities, a future. "I want to work with you, with the wolves. But I also want to finish my research. The gene therapy protocols Derek stole, I want to complete that work, publish it properly, make sure it gets used the way it was supposed to be used, helping people with genetic disorders." "BioCure has already contacted you, by the way," Sarah said. "They want you back. Full reinstatement, back pay for the 2 years, public apology. They're desperate to repair their reputation after the scandal." Marcus considered that. BioCure. The place that had employed Derek, that had enabled his fraud, that had destroyed Marcus's life through their negligence. "No, I don't want to go back there. I want to start over. New research group, new protocols, new everything. Something clean." "I might know some people who could help with that," Sarah said. "The university has been talking about expanding their biotech partnerships. With your experience and my connections, we could probably secure funding." They spent the next 2 hours in the valley with the pack. Marcus told Sarah everything about his week in the wilderness, how the wolves hunted, how they communicated, how their hierarchy functioned. Sarah listened like the scientist she was, asking questions, taking notes, her enthusiasm infectious. When the sun began to set, painting the valley in gold and crimson, Sarah said they needed to head back. Marcus stood reluctantly, knowing he could return tomorrow but still not wanting to leave. Alpha M7 approached one last time. The white wolf looked at Marcus for a long moment, then turned and led his pack back toward the den. But before disappearing into the trees, the alpha looked back once, made that conversational sound, and wagged his tail. In wolf language, it was a promise. Until next time. Marcus and Sarah hiked back to the truck in comfortable silence. When they reached the trailhead, Sarah handed Marcus her phone. "You should call some people. Let them know you're okay." Marcus stared at the phone. Who would he call? His mother was dead. His friends had abandoned him. He had no one. Except he did. He had Sarah. "I'll call later," Marcus said. "Right now, I just want to go to that cabin you mentioned. Sleep in a real bed, take a hot shower, eat something that isn't raw venison." Sarah laughed. "Fair enough. But Marcus, there's one more thing. Derek's assets are being seized. The government will liquidate everything to compensate his victims. BioCure is first in line, but you're entitled to compensation for wrongful imprisonment. Your lawyer estimates you could receive several $million. Several $1 million. The money Derek had stolen, now returning to the person who'd suffered most from its theft. Marcus should feel vindicated. Should feel
satisfied. Instead, he felt empty. Money doesn't bring Mom back. No, Sarah agreed quietly. It doesn't. But it does give you freedom to do whatever you want with the rest of your life. That's something. The cabin Sarah had mentioned was small but perfect. 1 room, a wood stove, a narrow bed, shelves of field guides and research journals. It reminded Marcus of the ranger cabin from Sarah's notes, but cleaner, more maintained. Marcus dropped his backpack and collapsed onto the bed. Real mattress, real pillow, real warmth. He was asleep within minutes. He dreamed of running through snow with the pack, his human form transforming into something wild and free. Alpha M7 ran beside him, matching his pace, accepting him completely. When Marcus woke, dawn light was streaming through the cabin windows. He could hear birds singing, a sound he hadn't registered in years. He lay there for a while, just listening, processing everything that had happened. Then he stood, dressed,
and walked outside. The research station was a cluster of buildings 100 yards from his cabin. Sarah was already awake, sitting on the porch with coffee, reviewing data on her tablet. She looked up when Marcus approached, smiled, and handed him a mug of coffee. "Sleep well?" "Better than I have in 2 years." Marcus sat beside her. "What's the plan for today?" "I thought we'd check on Alpha M7's wound, make sure it's healing properly, then maybe set up some new trail cameras in the northern section. The pack's been ranging farther lately, and I want to document their territory expansion." "Sounds good." They spent the morning hiking through the national forest, checking equipment, discussing Sarah's research. It felt natural, easy, like they were kids again, exploring the woods behind their childhood home. Around noon, they found the pack. Alpha M7 was teaching the younger wolves to hunt, demonstrating stalking techniques on a snowshoe hare. The lesson was remarkably sophisticated, the alpha showing patience and precision that would shame many human teachers. Marcus and Sarah watched from a distance, documenting the behavior. When the lesson concluded, Alpha M7 noticed them. The white wolf approached slowly, allowed Sarah to examine his wound, then sat beside Marcus with casual familiarity. The injury was healing perfectly. In another week, the scar would be the only evidence of the grizzly attack. Sarah took photographs, made notes, smiled at the easy interaction between her brother and her research subject. "This is unprecedented," she said. "A wild wolf allowing this level of contact, showing this degree of trust with a human who isn't me. It's going to revolutionize our understanding of wolf-human bonding." "Or maybe it just means Alpha M7 is an exceptional individual," Marcus suggested. "Not every wolf would do this, just like not every human would help an injured predator during an escape from prison." Sarah laughed. "Fair point, but I still think there's research value here. If we can understand what factors lead to this level of trust, we could develop better conservation strategies, better ways to foster coexistence between wolves and human communities." They spent the afternoon in the valley, and when evening came, Marcus didn't want to leave. But Sarah insisted they return to the research station before dark. "You'll be back tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after that. You're not losing them, Marcus. You're just learning to balance both worlds." That became Marcus's routine. Days spent in the valley with the wolves, evenings at the cabin reviewing research or planning experiments. Weeks turned into months. Spring arrived, melting the snow, revealing the valley's hidden beauty. Alpha M7's mate, a female Marcus hadn't seen during winter, emerged from the den with 4 pups. Tiny, clumsy balls of grey and white fur that tumbled over each other and play fought with heartbreaking innocence. The pack's dynamics shifted to accommodate the pups. Everyone became a caretaker, a teacher, a protector. Marcus watched as Silver, despite her permanent limp from the broken leg, became the pup's favorite playmate. Scout appointed himself as pup guardian, standing watch while the youngsters explored beyond the den. And Alpha M7 transformed from fierce leader to gentle father, tolerating endless pup attacks on his tail with patient dignity. Sarah documented everything, published papers that garnered international attention. "Unprecedented Human Integration into Wild Wolf Pack" was the title that made her famous in wildlife biology circles. Researchers from around the world contacted her, wanting to study the phenomenon. Marcus helped with the research, but his focus remained on his own work. He'd partnered with a biotech startup in Denver, securing funding to continue his gene therapy research. The protocols he developed at BioCure were being refined, tested, pushed toward clinical trials. By summer, Marcus had published 3 papers on his findings. By fall, the FDA had approved preliminary human testing. The therapy that Derek had tried to steal was going to help people, just as Marcus had always intended. 1 year after his exoneration, Marcus stood in the valley watching Alpha M7 teach the now adolescent pups to hunt elk. The white wolf had grayed slightly around the muzzle, his movements a bit slower, but his authority remained absolute. Sarah stood beside Marcus, documenting the hunt with her camera. "You know," she said, "I've been thinking about Mom, about what she would think of all this." She'd be proud, Marcus said, of both of us. I think she'd also be laughing. Remember when we were kids, and she said maybe someday we'd work together, combine your science and my animals? Marcus did remember. That conversation in the kitchen, Sarah chattering about wolf documentaries, their mother smiling as she made dumplings. She was right. She usually was. Yeah. Sarah lowered her camera. Marcus, I need to tell you something. I'm writing a book about your case, about the wrongful conviction, about the time with the wolves. A publisher approached me 6 months ago. Advance was substantial. I've been working on it in secret because I wanted to make sure I got your permission first. A book? Your story deserves to be told. Not the media version, the real version. How the justice system failed you, how you survived, how you found family in the most unexpected place, how we found each other again. Sarah's expression was earnest. But I won't publish without your consent. This is your life, your choice. Marcus thought about it. Thought about his mother, who died believing in him. About the wolves who'd saved him when he had nothing left. About Sarah, who'd risked everything to prove his innocence. About Derek, now serving 23 years in federal prison for fraud and embezzlement. Write the book, Marcus decided. But on one condition. All proceeds go to wolf conservation, specifically to expanding the protected territory here, ensuring Alpha M7's pack has the space they need. They saved my life. This is how I pay them back. Sarah smiled. Deal. And Marcus, there's one more thing. The university wants to establish a formal research position. Joint appointment between wildlife biology and biomedical engineering. They want you to lead it. Full professor, tenure track, complete lab access. You'd be studying wolf behavior and genetics, looking for applications in human medicine. Basically, combining everything Mom said we'd do. It was perfect. Too perfect. Marcus felt suspicion rising. Why? Why would they offer that? Because you're brilliant. Because you've published groundbreaking research. Because you have unique insight into wolf behavior that no one else can match. Because having you on faculty would be a massive coup for their reputation. Sarah grabbed his hand, and because I pushed for it, called in every favor I had, reminded them that they'd be idiots not to hire you. You're my brother. I'm allowed to be your advocate. Marcus pulled Sarah into a hug. Thank you. For everything. For believing in me when no one else would. For fighting for me. For giving me back my life. You gave me back my family, Sarah said. I should be thanking you. They spent the rest of the afternoon watching the pack hunt. When evening came and it was time to leave, Marcus approached Alpha M7 one last time. The white wolf sat beside him, patient and calm as always. I'm staying, Marcus told him, taking the university position, building a life here. I'll be around for the long term. You're stuck with me. Alpha M7 made his conversational sound, the one that meant understanding and acceptance. His tail wagged once. In the distance, the pups were playing, tumbling through grass, learning the skills they'd need to survive. Silver was teaching them to stalk, her patient movements showing them how to approach prey. Scout was standing guard, watching for threats, protecting the future generation. Marcus stood and walked back to Sarah. They hiked out of the valley together, talking about research plans and book chapters and the future. When they reached the truck, Marcus looked back one last time. Alpha M7 stood on the ridge, backlit by the setting sun, white fur glowing golden. The wolf raised his head and howled, a long, mournful sound that echoed through the valley. One by one, the pack joined in, 7 voices rising together, claiming territory, announcing presence, celebrating family. Marcus listened until the howling faded. Then, he climbed into the truck, and Sarah drove them home. 3 years later, Marcus received a call from FBI Special Agent Rebecca Torres. Dr. Chen, I need you to come to Denver. There's been a development in Derek Walsh's case. Marcus drove down from the research station immediately. Torres met him at the federal building, her expression grim. Walsh tried to make a deal, offered information about a larger criminal network in exchange for a reduced sentence. We investigated. It's bigger than anyone thought. She pulled out a file, spread documents across the conference table. Derek wasn't just embezzling from BioCure. He was running an international smuggling operation. Your gene therapy research? He wasn't selling it to pharmaceutical companies. He was selling it to criminal organizations who wanted to weaponize the technology. Marcus's blood went cold. Weaponize how? Genetic modification of patrol animals, military dogs, police canines. The gene therapy protocols you developed for treating disorders were being modified to enhance aggression, strength, physical capabilities, creating biological weapons. Torres pulled out more documents. We've traced the network to 17 countries, shut down operations on 4 continents, arrested over 60 people. And Dr. Chen, it all started with your research. The work you did at BioCure was revolutionary. Derek realized that before you did. That's why he framed you, Torres continued. Not just to cover embezzlement. He needed you out of the way so he could monetize your research without oversight. If you'd stayed at BioCure, you would have discovered what he was doing within months. He couldn't risk that. Marcus sat down heavily. His research, the work he'd done to help people with genetic diseases, had been twisted into something monstrous. How bad is it? We stopped it before large-scale deployment, found labs in Belarus, Myanmar, North Korea, confiscated all research materials. But Dr. Chen, there's something else. Torres pulled out a final document. Your wolf, Alpha M7. His GPS collar saved us. What? Derek's network was using coordinates near BridgerTeton National Forest for dead drops, smuggling modified research materials to international buyers. They thought the wilderness was safe, untraceable. But Alpha M7's GPS collar recorded every time the pack ranged near those sites. When we cross-referenced the wolf's movement patterns with suspicious activity in the area, we found the drop points. Recovered evidence that convicted 37 people. Torres smiled. That wolf didn't just save your life in the blizzard. He helped save thousands of lives by disrupting an international criminal network. His data was the key to everything. Marcus drove back to the research station in a daze. When he reached the valley, the pack was there. Alpha M7 approached, now 9 years old, graying but still strong. Marcus knelt beside him, ran his hands through the white fur, and started laughing. You magnificent bastard! You saved the world and didn't even know it. The wolf made his conversational sound, patient and knowing. Sarah found them there an hour later. Marcus told her everything. About Derek's network, the weaponized research, the GPS data that had brought down an international criminal organization. Alpha M7 is a hero, Sarah said, her eyes wide. This needs to be in the book. The final chapter. How a wolf's data helped save thousands of lives. Marcus looked at the white alpha, the animal who'd shown him what family meant, who taught him about trust and loyalty and fighting for something bigger than yourself. He's been a hero all along. I just didn't realize how much. The sun set over the valley, painting everything in gold and crimson. The pack settled around them, pups grown into adults now, a new generation learning from Alpha M7's example. And Marcus, finally at peace, finally home, sat with his sister and his pack and watched the stars come out over Wyoming.